Welcome to Breaking the Norm. In this podcast, we have Proton Partners CEO Mike Moran MBE. We cover Mike's background, a lot about proton beam therapy and Mike's company Proton Partners International and what they're doing, and Mike's approach to business and success in general. There's some good bits in there, so hopefully you can take something away from the podcast. Also, we talk about point 4 to start with in Mike's background, just to give context to that for those that don't know what point 4 is. It's a sports complex in Hereford, which is integrated with the Royal National College for the Blind. So that'll just give a bit of context when you're listening to Mike's background. Also, please subscribe to our weekly email. You can head over to breakingthenorm.blog, simply put your email in on our homepage, and you'll get a Monday morning motivational newsletter consisting of a positive news bulletin, our thought of the week, a link to our most recent podcast, and book recommendations and other things. It only takes about 2 minutes, and we promise not to spam you. So 2 minutes of reading on a Monday morning, bit of information and a bit of positivity. What's not to love? So here's our 4th podcast with Mike. Hope you enjoy. So I want to start off with your background. So how have you come to be CEO of Proton Partners International?
Well, it was a long journey, really. I had a full military career, 20 years in the army, joined as a private soldier, left as a major, set up my own business in Hereford, which was quite successful, and sold that to an American company, and then wrapped in golden handcuffs for a while, and then came around and set up Proton Partners.
That's quite impressive. First of all, going from private to major, was that a bit of a struggle? Or?
No, not really. I applied myself quite quickly. It was a surprise to my dad. He thought I'd be out of the army quicker than I went in. But no, I stood the test of time, stayed in, enjoyed every day, and successful.
Did you decide it's time to come out then and start your own
thing?
It
was, and I was 40, had 2 children. The timing was right. It was a major, pension was good, and I had this business itch to scratch and thought I'd scratch it. But I had a great career, did a lot of sport in my military career, and toured the world on the Queen Shilling and enjoyed life.
So what was this business that, what was your first business when you came out?
Well, it was in defence, so it was looking at infrastructure, and actually I've always said I'm Johnny on the spot. Whether I know where the spot is at the time is a different matter, but it just happened to be, just as the Iraq and Afghan war started spiking up, and there was an awful lot of call on military hardware and infrastructure, and I established this business, and it was great. So we supplied a lot of equipment out into Iraq and Afghanistan, went out there visiting as a contractor, haven't been formally there as a soldier, so it was great to go back as a contractor and
that's
see.
A bit different.
Well, it was great to have a return ticket.
Yeah.
Useful.
That sounds very interesting. So you went on from there. You've worked with a lot of other businesses, haven't you, as well? I know you've got your MBE was for contributions to commerce, was it, or similar?
Yes, it was. Yeah, so to services to business, and at the time I had a business in Hereford. I also sat on the Learning and Skills Council within Herefordshire and Worcestershire as chair of that, and then also chair of the chamber. And as a chair of the Learning and Skills Council, I was involved in a lot of the projects that have now been built out in Hereford, like the Point 4. I signed that proposition off and made sure that we saw the funding through for them to build that. And it was great, actually. When that first set up, I was able to go there and watch Italy play England in blind football at the school. It was just a brilliant occasion to sit in there knowing it was my signature that signed it off. Not that it was all about vanity, but it was just fantastic to make a difference.
Seeing the finished product
to so many more people. And I think the other key thing about that whole project was that the community around Hereford went into the college, and that hadn't happened before. So we always used to see people from the college, the students, either partially sighted or blind, walking down with the sticks on a Saturday going into town. Now you'd see them walking with people who train beside them at Point 4. And it's just a brilliant, real insight into that college community, and then
quite rewarding.
Being able to work alongside people and use the gym, and it was just fantastic.
That sounds quite a rewarding project to be part of.
Yeah, it was.
So when you've been working with these projects and businesses, what do you think it takes? Is it the people behind it that make it successful? If you have a good idea, like what makes a successful business or idea?
Yeah, it's always about people for me, and I recruit on behaviours. You can have all the skills, but if you've got the wrong people in front of your business, you'll never succeed. So it's about business. Of course, you've got to have the right product and services, but actually, if you've got the right people taking it out, they're real business multipliers. And, I used to say to my sales team in Hereford when I had the business there, I'd walk in one day and there'd be 12 of them sat in the office, and they're all on computers doing emails. I said, just get out and meet people. Talk to your customers, get out, take them for a game of golf, take them to the football match, build relationships up with them, because it's those relationships that stand the test of time. So if there ever is a difficult period, so like the recession, great example, our business thrived because we built it on relationships, and people do business with people. And when it's all about an email or all about a telephone call, you can always say no. Whereas if it's a business relationship, face-to-face, people involved with each other intimately in business, that will never die.
That's a great bit of advice. I like that. I'll start working on that myself. So that was going to lead me on to my other question. As CEO of your current company, what do you look for in staff? So if you're employing someone, what is it that makes them stand out?
Well, I think often it's about all about behaviours for me. So I like to meet people, gauge how they are, socially, how they interact. But more importantly, I have a recruiting organisation called RWB Global, and they're Herefordshire based. And they're now doing all of our recruiting at Proton Partners. And Mel Nash and I have known each other for years. She used to recruit for me in Hereford in the business there. And she knows exactly what works for me, what would work within the business. But more importantly, she gets to know the business and she gets under the skin of the business. And that allows her then to go out and do the first sift and really make sure that whoever she brings forward for interview is a great fit for the organisation. And often she'll call me up and say, there's one or two people and this is the individual or that's the individual that you need to have because of the perfect fit. And she's seldom wrong.
She knows the company well then,
yeah. Well, she knows the company well. She knows what will work, but she knows people.
Yeah.
And she really understands people. Now, she'd never recruited for the healthcare industry before, but because we had this real trust, I was able to just allow her to get on and do it. And she's recruited probably 80% of our staff, everything from physicists right through.
Seems to be working then.
Yeah, it's incredible.
So, for those who don't know, so Mike is CEO of Proton Partners. What is Proton Partners?
Well, what we set out to do 3 years ago, and we set the company up on World Cancer Day on the 4th of February 2015. It was a very deliberate act because what we wanted to do is make a real statement about transforming cancer services in the UK. And they are quite disparate. There's an under-provision of 25% across the country of radiotherapy services, and there were no proton beam therapy capability other than low-energy proton beam in Clatterbridge. So we set out to build this network of cancer centres, and each cancer centre would have and focus on survivorship and recovery at the front door, and then imaging, chemotherapy, immunotherapy, radiotherapy, and high-energy proton beam therapy. So a complete pathway for the patient. So the patients could come into a vibrant centre and be treated with the latest technology.
Yeah, because
people probably recognise proton therapy from the news, where there's been children kidnapped by their parents, isn't there, to take them abroad to get it, or they're having to be sent abroad places. Is it Prague and Jacksonville at the moment, or something like that, isn't it?
Yeah,
Two places.
so up until we established our centres, and we're now treating patients, which is great.
Yeah, congratulations.
So, no, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
And the quickest centre anywhere in the world to be built.
It's impressive.
It's incredible. And the first to ever be commissioned so early after the cyclotron is delivered. And the cyclotron is the beating heart of the proton beam system. But a lot of people are familiar with proton beam therapy through Aisha King, who's taken out of the hospital in Southampton, taken to Spain, then on to Prague by his parents. Now, the great success story there is he was treated with proton beam therapy, and all of the news now, in fact, he was in the news recently, not that I watched it, but it was Loose Women. There was a session on there, and it was great to see him riding his bike, having a normal life, and the outcome for him a few years earlier was much bleaker. So that's proton beam therapy, and there's real evidence that it's successful at doing what it does.
So now you're providing it in the UK, obviously, so hopefully cases like that won't have to happen if it can be treated in the UK.
Yeah, exactly. So no child, no individual should leave the country now for proton beam therapy. Now, clearly, there's a lot of politics at play, but we need to take the politics out of healthcare. And, of course, cancer's quick, bureaucracy's slow.
Yeah.
What we've got to do as a nation is really embrace this new, it's no panacea, it's not a silver bullet, it will fit in a certain space, and that space is within 10% of patients who'd receive radical radiotherapy will have a better outcome with proton beam therapy. And that 10% doesn't come from me, Mike Moran, it doesn't come from Professor Carol Sikora, who's the foremost expert in this across the country.
Who is part of Proton Partners?
Yeah, he is. He's our Chief Medical Officer, and Carol and I were founders of the business in 2015. But this is evidence that is right across Europe. So if you look at Europe and the rest of the world, it's anything from 10% to 25% of patients who receive radical radiotherapy would have better outcomes with proton beam therapy.
So what's the resistance to it? Is it just...
Well, I think there's some resistance politically, and of course we have to remember in this country we're always slow to seize on innovations in healthcare.
Yep.
There's also the cost element. It's slightly more than normal radiotherapy.
It's got to be cheaper than on this. Like, there's a few cases where they've like people in the UK, children have been sent abroad, haven't they? So it's got to be cheaper to keep them in the UK than send them to Prague or America, is it?
Oh, well, that's absolutely right. Patients are currently paying over £114,000 to go abroad. The NHS is paying that to send patients abroad. Plus, then you've got all of the travel, the accommodation, but more importantly,
the stress on the patient, isn't it?
Exactly. You've got a real poor experience for the patient where they have to be away for about 6 weeks. So they're abroad for 6 weeks. There's a fracture point with the family. So if it's a nuclear family, mother, father, 2 children, one of the parents has to go abroad while the other stays at home. Perhaps one of them's working. I mean, it's fraught with difficulty. Now, in the UK, those patients can come to our first centre in Newport. So the Rutherford Cancer Centre, South Wales, is in Newport, just off Junction 28, fully comprehensive cancer centre. We have NHS oncologists signed up with practice and privileges in each of our centres, and they see the patients through. So it's a real, and I think more importantly, we're working with one of the leading centres in America, University of Pennsylvania Hospital in Philadelphia, who provide peer review on all of our plans. So each patient will get a proton plan and a photon plan, so proton beam therapy and radiotherapy plan. The NHS clinician says which one will be better for the patient, so where the patient will get better outcomes, and that's the plan we deliver. But before we deliver it, we peer review it in America So the leading proton centre in America, UPenn, their clinicians look at our plan, rate the plan, and either approve it or adjust it and then approve it.
So it really is top-end care you're getting.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm going to go total change of topic now. So the common theme between these podcasts is success. And a lot of people have inspirations that help them achieve success. So who or what was your greatest inspiration?
Oh, without question, Ernest Shackleton. And Ernest Shackleton was an explorer, and his expedition was fraught with difficulty. His ship was stuck in the Wavell Sea and broke up eventually, and him and all of his crew escaped off to Elephant Island. They rowed across to Elephant Island, and they were stuck there, doomed. And Ernest Shackleton and 2 others rowed across to South Georgia and climbed across the island. The first people to ever traverse across the island, went into a whaling station, borrowed a boat, sailed back to rescue the rest of their crew. That got stuck, so they had to wait a little while longer. And then eventually they went back onto Elephant Island and rescued all of his crew. And as the ship arrived close to Elephant Island, the crew were coming out of overturned boats that they had for shelter. And Ernest Shackleton stood on the deck counting his men, brought all of his men back. And that is real, true leadership.
Yeah.
And it was a great honour of mine during my military service to serve on South Georgia. And I lived there for 9 months. It was a fantastic time. Skied every day. I'm a skier. So I skied every day, patrolling, and stood at the gravesite of Ernest Shackleton. There's a cross there for him, just above Griffithkin. And the house where we lived on the island was called Shackleton House. So without question, it's a real inspiration.
That sounds very interesting. It's just the leadership you admire there, is it?
Well, it's leadership, and actually it's understanding. When you look at people, anybody can get things right, but it's when things go wrong, that's when true leaders come out. How they recover and how they bring everybody back alongside and get the plan back on track. And you have to remember, same in business, whatever you do in life, no plan survives contact with the enemy. And sometimes the enemy can be conditions, it could be market conditions, so you have to adjust, you have to be agile enough to constantly change as you're moving along against the conditions that you're facing.
I like that. So, obviously, we just said about what your inspiration is, but what is success to you, and how can people achieve it?
Well, we saw success last week when Liverpool beat Roma 5-2. I'm a great Liverpool fan. I guess, for me, what does success look like? Personally, it's to do the things I want to do, not the things I have to do. But you can measure success in many ways. I never focus on making money. I always make investors nervous when I say that.
Yeah, I'm sure you do.
But I focus on value, and I focus on building a machine that makes money, or building a machine that churns out high value. And that machine is not just about the component parts. It's about the grey matter. So people, processes, procedures, knowledge, know-how, IP, everything that makes the machine intelligent, and that churns out high value.
I want to go back to Proton Partners, if that's okay. How did you come to be a part of it? How did you and Carol Sikora found it? What was the drive behind it?
Well, yeah, quite simple. I mean, in 2014 was the first time I'd heard about proton beam therapy, and a friend of mine sent me a business plan for what was going to be called something else, but it was essentially what is now turned out to be Proton Partners, and I looked through it. Actually, I liked it, but it wasn't for me, so I put it to one side. And then in November 14, my brother got breast cancer, and him and I were like Captain Scarlet growing up. All my brothers, I have 5 brothers, and we're like Captain Scarlet, indestructible. But suddenly he's facing this issue of breast cancer. So I remembered this business plan was all about cancer. So I looked up Carol Sikora and went and met Carol Sikora. And as it happened, that was in the January 15. As it happened, the 2 things were coming together were Carol was looking to establish a business to do proton beam therapy. And we just got together. There's a number of people involved in that first meeting. And we went out and raised the capital and did it.
As simple as that.
Well, often, business is simple.
Yeah.
And people try and overcomplicate it. But for me, you tell people what you're going to do and you deliver it. You do it. And business shouldn't be much more complicated than that. You can overplan any business and underperform. It should be really quite crisp. But often it is about, the perfect storm, people coming together. The timing was right. Of course, the Aisha King incident was... So when we met with fund managers, we didn't have to explain what proton beam therapy was. They knew it. And they liked what we were going to do. And this is real disruptive in the marketplace. We're now seen as the largest developer of proton beam therapy centres. Nobody's built more than one at any one time. Nobody's built more than one.
So how many have you got now?
So we got 4. We got Newport, South Wales, Northumberland, Reading, and of course Liverpool.
Where you're from.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that was great, actually, to go back into the city where I was born.
Yeah.
And to build this proton beam therapy centre in the centre of Liverpool. It was fantastic. And there is a slight twist to this. The site where we're on is actually the site of my brother's former school. Brother who had breast cancer, Tony. And he went to the school at Paddington Comprehensive School at the time, and I have to say it was the worst school in Liverpool.
Was it?
Reputationally, it was the worst school in Liverpool. He went there. And the site now is called the Knowledge Quarter in Liverpool. Certainly what he left school with was anything but knowledge, or not the right knowledge he left school with. But so it's great to be on that site. And, I've got a real passion for the city and the people of the city, and great people, great city. And it served me well over the years.
So you've got quite wide coverage across the UK now, so anyone should really be able to have access, shouldn't they?
Well, our vision is to have a cancer centre within 90 minutes of 80% of the UK's population within the next 5 years.
That'd be quite impressive.
And it will. We've got a couple of other centres to build into that plan, but we'll do it.
And that obviously feeds into what we were saying earlier on about minimal disruption for the patients, isn't it? If they've got it just down the road.
Correct. Yeah. So they don't have to travel to central places.
Yeah.
They can go to their local centre. They can be treated by local people with the same accent as them, and they can feel at home. Yeah. And they can get well.
Are you expanding internationally at all?
Well, we already have a centre in Abu Dhabi. So we invested in a centre in Abu Dhabi. We raised $50 million in Abu Dhabi, so ourselves and 2 other partners, to buy an ongoing cancer business there called Gulf International Cancer Centre. And it's our plan now to build a proton centre alongside. And we'll provide the management infrastructure, so we'll put all of the knowledge and expertise that were built up in the UK across over there to make sure that it fits within the network of cancer centres.
Have you got any others in the pipeline at all?
Yeah, so we've got planning application in Ireland at the moment, in Kildare. that'll be fantastic for us because it's literally just across the water, and we're already talking to the oncologists from HSE, which is the NHS equivalent. We've got the oncologists from the Dublin area signed up with us, and that'll be a fantastic centre.
Yeah.
And we're likely to do 2 in Ireland, actually, 1 in Kildare, 1 in Dublin. That's our plan.
Good. So it sounds like your coverage is going to be a game changer, really, isn't it, I suppose, for cancer treatment?
Well, it is, and I think that's what we set out to do. I think one of my brothers was telling me not so long ago that he'd been up in the loft at home, in the old family home, and found my old school report that said I was disruptive in class. So being disruptive in business is great.
Yeah, it's following through quite well.
Yeah.
Change topic again now. I want to go back to your MBE, because I've never actually spoken to someone who's been to get one. So what was it like? What's the process of getting an MBE?
Well, actually, it was news to me. First I heard of it was a letter turned through the door inviting me to accept the MBE, and I was delighted to. So it was a great moment, and I remember James, my son. He was probably 9 at the time, and I didn't tell him until it had been published. So then it was real. So it being published, and I read it in the paper that morning, and I said to James, I've just been awarded the MBE, and he said, "Oh yeah, very good, Dad." And off he went, and I thought, oh, well, that wasn't that impressive. And then he came running up the stairs, and he said, "Dad, do you know Stephen Gerrard's got an MBE?" So now suddenly it's a great thing.
Yeah.
So it was great. It's a great moment for the family. I always work hard. I work away a lot, so it's great that there's recognition there, and the family had a great day out at the Palace
Down London,
which is good. Yeah. And that was a good day.
Yeah, I can imagine it was. Was it a member of the royal family or that award?
Yeah, it was Princess Anne
Nice.
presented to me. And that was a nice moment because several months earlier, Princess Anne had visited Hereford, and while I was chair of the chamber, and she came into, if I'd set up a shelter for her in Rotherwas, so we could bring a lot of companies into this infrastructure. It was a military shelter, and we did an event there with Princess Anne.
So she's seen firsthand what you were doing before she awarded you the MBE, really?
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
It was really good.
With your military background, I covered this in another podcast, and I know I'll be covering it again when I talk to Tim Crockett, who's rowing the Atlantic to raise money for veterans of PTSD. But a lot of people struggle transitioning from military to civilian life. What's your tips for people suffering from that?
Well, it was a lot easier for me because I was going into business, and of course, a lot of the business strategy is born out of military strategy. In fact, the very term strategy is business of the generals. That's the definition of it. So, you look at all of the MBA books that you'll ever pick up, and it'll talk about the art of war, Sun Tzu's art of war. So there's a lot of things happening. I used to lecture or do presentations in Hereford on something called the manoeuvrist approach to business. And the manoeuvrist approach in military terms is about avoiding the strength of the enemy and exploiting their weakness. And if you translate that into the business community, where you avoid the strength of your competitors but exploit their weakness, that means what you have to do is you have to understand your competitors. You have to look at where you have strengths, where they have weaknesses, and vice versa, and then build a plan around that. And often, most business weaknesses around agility. They're not agile enough to adapt quickly enough, whereas if you can, and you can seize opportunity, it gives you a great advantage. But, I never really complicated it. I left the military, loved every day I was there. I left early because I had this business itch to scratch, so I knew what I wanted to do. And everything I did in the military set me up for that day I was going to leave. And I guess it's a mindset. Some people, and I think, going back to my, when I first joined the army, and my father, who didn't really think I'd last that long, for a number of reasons, but he said to me, just don't get used to the green skin, because one day you'll have to come out. And I think I'd call my brother a civvy, and he said, just remember, he is a civilian, but you'll be a civilian twice in your life. So real wise words which really stuck to me. So I always planned and prepared to leave, and had a great career. But I've been out since 2001 now in the business community. My business career I'm really enjoying too.
Would you advise people to join the forces?
Well, yeah, I guess it's not for everybody. It's a great life, and if you apply yourself well, the one great thing about the military is they're an equal opportunities employer, and what you get out of it is commensurate to what you put in. So if you put your heart and soul in, you'll get an awful lot out the back end, but you'll always be treated fairly in the military. And great opportunities, particularly if you're sporting. I was a sportsman in the military. I was a biathlete, so skiing and shooting, downhill skier. I was the chief instructor in a ski lodge. So
Nice.
My winters were spent swanning around, either racing, Nordic racing, or teaching people to ski. In fact, that's how I met my wife.
Oh, is it?
Taught her to ski. Yeah.
Living the life, really, then, wouldn't you?
Regretted it every day.
Hopefully she won't be listening to this.
She won't be listening to this. No.
What are your long-term goals, then?
Oh, crikey. Well, clearly we're going to make a success of Proton Partners. We've got a number of other centres in plan. We're going to build a diagnostic capability as well. And my ambition there really is to be able to diagnose cancer within 24 hours.
That's pretty impressive.
If I was ever to pigeonhole myself, it would be an Imagineer. I imagine a different future.
Yeah.
And part of that imagination is about somebody reporting to the GP with signs and symptoms. They then go to the diagnostic capability, then diagnose cancer. They're then that day treated on a machine for cancer. And actually with technology today, we can do that. It just needs a different mindset. And we need to take the worry and the concern out of that. So I guess, ambition-wise, I need to build this business. We need to make sure that it's high value. And what high value means to the patient is better outcomes and an earlier return to normality, whatever that normality was or is in the future, but that earlier return by just treating them well.
I think you're going to need more than an MBE when you finish that. You're
Yeah.
probably end up knighting you, wouldn't they?
We'll see.
No, that sounds pretty cool. I suppose it's a lot. Currently, there's so much inefficiencies. Like you hear about people waiting months for results that have been sat there, stuff like. So I suppose if you can streamline the process and include this new technology, survival rates should go through the roof.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, we've got some of the worst survivorship rates in the country. Yeah. And I think it's shocking. It's 2018. And of course, the biggest part of this is the worry. So people are told that they have cancer, and, it's a big black cloud over them. And my brother was a great example. He was Captain Scarlet, indestructible. He now sees things very differently. And it's all because of that word cancer.
Yeah.
And it frightens people. And of course, if you're told that you have cancer and then you've got to wait 6 to 8 weeks before you can get into for treatment or for, another scan, for confirmation. You just do nothing but worry, and your life stands still. Yeah. And I saw his life stand still for 12 months while he was in and out of hospitals, and things can be a lot better. You can improve.
So is the thing holding it back just the budget, say NHS for example, with the efficiencies, with long term, do you think it would actually save them money? Or
of course. And I'm not an NHS knocker, because I actually think they do an incredible job.
Yeah.
However, they can't do everything well, and some things they just can't do well. And cancer isn't their top priority. They've got, mental health, cardiac is a higher priority. Dementia is looming now. We're all living longer, so this disease will never go away. And we're pumping a lot of money into research, and I hope one day, actually, my business fails because cancer's cured.
Yeah.
There's no, there's a cure for cancer. That'd be a great moment, but I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime.
Well, the rates seem to be going through the roof, don't they? Something like 1 in 2 people soon, I think they're predicting to have cancer.
That's right, and there's 2 of us in a room.
Yeah, so one of us is going to. Yeah.
I'm all right because I've got a cancer centre. What are you going to do?
Well, I'm going to have to come and see your cancer centre, aren't I?
yeah, you can get mates rates.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, it is going through the roof, isn't it? So they need to do something, and I suppose you're the answer for that. So.
But you've just got to say, and this is really what frustrates me, just say you're going to do something different and do something about it. We all know what the issue is.
Yeah.
So let's just grab it, do something about it, and make something happen. The worst thing you can ever do is just sit still and talk about a problem. And, for me, I never joined talking shops. I'm a man of action, always have been. And I like to be in the thick of the action. I like to be part of it. But I know I can make a difference. And sometimes you can talk, but let's just do.
Yeah, get on with it.
And make something happen.
Yeah. I totally agree. Is there side effects to proton therapy? Like, so chemotherapy, people get very ill, really, don't they?
Well, so what Proton does, and the real difference is, so X-rays pass right through the body. So it will pass through the healthy tissue on the way to the tumour, pass through the tumour, killing the cancerous cells, and then pass back through the healthy tissue on the exit dose. So the dose passes right through the body. With a proton, it stops at a point in the body, which is a tumour. So all the energy is computer guided to that. It's almost like a sniper.
Yeah.
And it hits the tumour, and the energy drops off on a phenomenon called the Bragg peak. And there is no downstream effects to that. So there's no healthy tissue affected beyond the tumour site. And, at the moment, patients who are being treated in Newport, there's no side effects there whatsoever.
Brilliant, yeah.
So the tumour is shrunk, and nothing will ever grow back there.
That's pretty impressive. And you have full-time scientists at the site, don't you?
Well, we have physicists, oncologists come in, so we have across the network, probably around about now 45, 50 NHS oncologists with practice and privileges to operate within one of our centres. So, real expertise in there. Physicists and therapists that deliver the treatment.
And the physicists constantly monitoring this proton. Is it like a machine, I'm guessing?
Yes, it is, yeah. So the system is 150 tonnes, all told. It's the most expensive machine in healthcare history to date. I'm sure there'll be something coming along.
Something will come up.
But, we in there's a full team in the centre. The dosimetrists, the physicists, the therapists, the radiographers, the ancillary staff, everyone from reception. We're all involved in this. It's not just about the management making things happen. It's everybody across the centre.
What would your parting advice be to anyone listening on how to break the norm? So you've clearly done it. You've got these businesses. You've got your MBE. You're breaking boundaries in cancer. I know we've touched on it with leadership and things like that. But how would you break the norm? Just
think clearly, act deliberately. Think it through and then do. And often it doesn't get much simpler. You do it every day in your everyday life, but people seem to get paralysed by fear. I don't fear anything in life, and I certainly don't, I'm not paralysed by fear in business. You make mistakes. We all make mistakes, as long as you don't constantly make them. But sometimes actually those mistakes shape success, and you have to have that freedom to be able to operate without working in a blame culture. So I've never worked in a blame culture. We take corporate responsibility if something goes wrong, and actually we take all the plaudits when it goes right. And you have to remember that failure is an orphan. Success has many fathers.
I like that one. Yeah, I do like that. And one thing I wanted to ask as well, you obviously get a lot of investors or business partners. How do you approach these people?
Well, often we're introduced to investors, and then it's generally myself and Carol go in and we pitch to the investors, and we've been successful so far. We've raised 130 million equity and 35 million debt. People buy into the story, they buy into the management team, they buy into what you're going to do, and clearly you have to have a plan to do that, and you have to deliver it, but you have to give great confidence that you're going to deliver it as well.
Do you think that's the same in all businesses? So just go in, be confident?
Always. And you have to be able to talk about your numbers, talk about the plan, talk about the market, make sure that you're confident and it's practiced and it's slick, and then just deliver it well. But never give people BS. Just tell them as it is, and just make sure you've got your thinking right.
I think that's advice everyone can take on board with business, isn't it? All the way down. I'm going to apply it to my own. So
great. Well, you'll always be successful.
I hope so. Right. Well, thank you very much, Mike, and I hope you all enjoyed listening.
Great. Thanks, Jack.
No worries.
Thanks to Mike for coming on. If you'd like to learn more, give Proton Partners International a Google. You'll find them on there, or like Rutherford Cancer Centres on Facebook to keep up to date with any updates. Make sure you've subscribed and liked all of our platforms. So however you're listening to this, subscribe to ensure you get our future podcasts. We've got some really interesting people coming on, from artists to professional rugby players, martial artists, special forces guys. We've got quite a few interesting people. So make sure you stay tuned and head over and subscribe to our newsletter. Right, thank you, and I'll see you next time.